We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Vellet. All right, BraveCo men, welcome back. This week's podcast guest. Honestly, I think I'm more excited about this podcast than I have any other one that I've done, and that's real, is Mr. Billy Molls. Yeah, I've been following Billy, modern day mountain man, for quite a while now, and just been watching his films on YouTube, listening to him talk. And there's not a lot of men that I look up to and go, man, I want some of what he's got, you know? But Billy's one of those guys. Billy, you've been a guide for a long time. I'm going to let you kind of introduce what you do. But you've been a guide for a long time, and you've got 3 daughters and an incredible wife, at least from what I've seen. We're just starting to get to know each other, but Billy, it's an honor to have you on here. Thank you so much for coming on. And I hope today that guys get a really good feel of what it means to be a man, and just a deeper dive and inspired by your life story, what you've gone through, and what God's put on your heart. So thank you so much for coming on here, man.
My pleasure.
I want to, sorry, the delay. I want to just hear a little bit about how you grew up and how you got into the hunting world and ended up in Alaska.
Yeah, I grew up on a farm. Still living three miles from where I grew up in Wisconsin. Dairy farm, tons of work. My parents worked 7 days a week, milking cows morning and night every day. My grandpa was a professional trapper in addition to being a farmer. He would trap all winter long in the north woods of Wisconsin, 5-6 months at a crack. He took pictures and videos of his experiences, his lifestyle more than anything. And he was in his 70s probably when I first remember him. And, hunting, trapping is who he was. Started trapping with my grandpa, and when we're going along the swamp and he'd say, "Hey, you see that sign?" He'd look at the bank, you see that sign. And I'm thinking stop sign. And I'm like, I'm not seeing it. And then he'd say, "Oh, that's a mink, that's a beaver, that's a muskrat." And he'd put this trap, he's like, he's going to put his foot right there. And I'm like, how does he know that? He never really explained much. I mean, like if you ask him questions, I just didn't remember him explaining much, but you just kind of listen. But I realized it's like he could see things that were invisible to me, and he knew a language that I didn't understand. And so I was just kind of fascinated right then. And then my dad took me, if you watch my YouTube channel, I'll talk about Lightning Creek. And that was like a light switch moment for me. Is my dad, I was about 8. We milked the cows. We went to Lightning Creek, and we shoved off with a rowboat to set traps for muskrats. And we got away from the road, away from the High Line, away from Henry Hines' farm. And it was just a light switch moment. I just realized, like, this is how I'm going to live my life, because surrounded everything around me was nature. And then ahead was a bend in the river. Where it went, I didn't know, but I knew I wanted to see what was there. And I'd say life doesn't get any better than that. I've hunted all over the world. I've guided in Alaska now for 25 years, but that's it. Like that's the adventure, is just what's next, And so Grandpa always said, if you want outdoor adventures, Alaska's the place where you need to go. So I signed up for a guide school in Montana right out of high school, headed there, worked for an outfitter in Idaho. That winter, I just called, emailed every outfitter I could find in Alaska, told them I was a farm kid, greener than grass. And what I realized then is just like surrendering to the Lord. Those outfitters weren't worried about what I knew, because I wasn't going to impress them with my acumen of outdoors skills, right? But I just told them I'm willing to do whatever. And they knew, all right, this kid's a farm kid. He's probably got some self-reliance, and he knows how to work. And so somebody gave me an opportunity, and been doing it ever since.
Man, that's awesome. Um, hunting and trapping, like trapping was kind of a dream of mine when I was a little kid. I grew up in the mountains, Northern California, and just a small town of 3,000, and never actually got into trapping at all because I live in California. So I don't know, the trapping rules are kind of crazy, but living that lifestyle was always a dream of mine. I remember growing up, like my parents got me a BB gun when I was, I think, 8 years old. And I'd wear one out almost every summer, pumping it up and chasing birds and hunting. You're right. Like that adventure of the unknown, not knowing what was going to happen, coming home from school every day and just going out into the woods was like, man, just the best way to spend, I don't know, my young years growing up. So that's awesome, Billy. Um, I guess I'm curious, were your parents Christians and did you grow up in a good, strong Christian home?
I would say no. We went to a Christian church. We went to a Lutheran church. I guess I don't personally believe, I don't know, that's probably ruffle feathers, but I personally don't believe I was saved until I was in my early 30s. Um, just, I never noticed any difference of anybody. I always looked at what I saw as Christians was like a mama barn swallow feeding her chicks. Is a bunch of needy people sitting there with their mouths open, and then the preacher putting a little wafer of bread in their mouth. And because everything works for me
Yeah.
by analogy through nature or hunting. So I didn't grow up in a strong Christian home. Went to church, but I was left with more questions than answers. And I never noticed a difference between the people in church and the people out of it. And so that always was a big question for me. Another one was, well, if God is everything, why are we concerned about anything else? And it probably,
Mm,
I guess it really took me probably really until, I don't know, maybe even about about COVID time, if I'm being perfectly honest. I believe that I really
wow.
rode the fence for a long time. When I was saved, August 17th, 2011, when my daughter was born, I was in the wilderness of Alaska. That's when I fully surrendered my life to Christ. You know, preacher buddy of mine, he'd argue, that I was saved because I was baptized as an infant, that I was already saved, but, that just the Holy Spirit was at work in me. Maybe he's right. I don't know. But I tend to not
Yeah.
believe that because I was definitely not living for the Lord. I wouldn't say that there was no conviction of sin. There was at times, but I mean, it's nothing like after August 17th, 2011, then like the conviction of sin was there, and there was a willingness and a yearning to live my life for something beyond myself. And I feel like I wrestled with
Mm,
that for a long time, um, and tried to play, I think James said that a double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. And I felt like I did that for far too long. And guys, we were talking about Pat and Isaac earlier, guys like that I could see that they weren't living double lives. I was around a few of those guys. Isaac's dad, Kurt Bedingfield, who I'm sure your friend Pat knows. So there was a
yep.
couple of guys those were my ministers, bush pilots. A couple of guides that I'd run into. They were my ministers, and they maybe spoke a handful of Bible verses to me, but I saw them over years and years and years, and I saw that they walked the walk, and they saw something that I didn't have. And I paid it, they had a light, their light was shining, and I was watching. And I'm a hard-headed idiot. It took me many, many years. So yeah, I would say that's what it came to me to, and then I started reading the Bible. So somebody gave this to me at a sports show, um, maybe 15 years ago, and I think I just copied the New Testament, Psalms and Proverbs, and I packed it around, read it sparingly. Um, and I was like, man, if I'm going to the church, if I'm supposed to believe this, why am I not reading it? And if God is everything, why isn't God really all that we talk about? And so like, I feel like God's had a calling, calling on my life. I believe I believe he's got a calling on all of our lives. And I guess
Yeah.
there's a scripture that, we're not drawn unto, God draws us to him, some people
Hmm.
argue with that, but, whether God draws everybody or not, but, I believe if you're seeking, that tells you right there that God's drawing, but yeah, when I
Yeah.
look back at my life, like those light switch moments, and I'd say that I've had probably maybe about 20 of them, like I had in Lightning Creek, where I just saw, it was just definitive that I believe that that's God called me to the wilderness. And, when I was saved and I heard God's still small voice, and I'm just like, okay, Jesus, you're real. Like, no way. And, I believed. I'm just like, holy smokes, the gospel of Jesus
Yeah.
is true,
Yeah.
because I heard it through nature, the language that I understand. And I'm like, and I'm literally looking, I was literally born again. It's the only way to describe it. And maybe I should backtrack and tell the whole, my testimony. But when he said, and I asked, I just said, now what? And I heard his voice. Wasn't audible, but it was just crystal clear in my head. It was, share this. And then, so the wrestling match where I started wrestling with God was like, what does that mean? And then I'm like, oh man, maybe I'm being called into ministry. Like, man, I didn't want to go to college. I couldn't picture myself with a robe on. But then finally, after years, I realized it's like, man, he's calling me to minister through my hunting videos. And then that was like more
Wow.
scary than the idea of becoming a preacher. And so anyways, I wrestled with him for years until finally I'm just like, you know what? It just took me a while to really understand that that's what he was calling me to do, is share my faith through hunting.
Man, I can't tell you how important I think that is, because I grew up in the church my whole entire life, and I've been a pastor since 2004 on staff. My dad has been a pastor for a really long time, and one of the worst things I think that's happened is when you grow up in church and when you go to church, so many people look at that and they want to be the pastor, right? Like because we think that that's the hierarchy of being a Christian, is like, I'd be up on stage and I'd be teaching everyone, whatever. But the truth is like, and I remember being really young and my dad started to teach this, like, wherever you are, whatever you do, like, that's your ministry. Your ministry isn't in a pulpit. We're not all trying to become pastors and preachers. That's just like one small, tiny little, like, the pastor's the guy that hands out tools, right? Like, he's not the top of the list. He's just a guy that's supposed to equip. But man, if you could be a hunting guide and do that with kingdom purpose and kingdom values, if you're a dentist and doing that with all of your might, no matter where you're working. I remember when my dad started to teach that and really dive into it. It's just really revolutionary, because so many people miss out on what they're really supposed to do because they try to throw aside all the gifts that God's given them so that they can get into, on some pulpit, instead of like, dude, just do whatever gift you have, right? Which is the verse that I love in the Bible. It says, anything your hand finds to do it with all your might, because that's what God wants to really promote in your life and use to spread, to be the witness of who he is. So I love that, Billy.
Yeah. And I know I agree. And I never, like, nobody ever said that, like, growing up, nobody explained that to me, that like your family as a father, that's your family is your ministry, your job. Someone's calling, someone's purpose might be to take care of their elderly mother or their grandpa. For their whole life, that might be their ministry. It's all different. And then, as it's almost like as religion got corporatized, everything got, oh, well, you need to help at the church. If you're not the pastor, if you're a member of the church, well, you need to do this. Yeah, I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but I think so often, our flesh is drawn into works, right? And I think that if you're doing anything out of the flesh, it's gonna burn up sooner or later. And yeah, we all have our own unique ministry and our relationship with the Lord. And for me, until I really started reading the Word, that's what changed it for me. And the only place that I could really read the Word and get anything out of it was when I was in Alaska, because there is no other voice to be heard out there. All the distraction is gone, and for me, the Word of God just came to life.
We both have been around so many men and work with a lot of guys, and with BraveCo last year, we discipled 500 men and just believe so much in, well, really just doing what Jesus told us to do and taught us to do, right? Is to go and make disciples, because otherwise there's really no way to grow and to learn as a man and to grow strong, is if you don't have somebody else really taking you alongside and training you. And I guess I'd love to hear, like, what has been impactful, like who are the men in your life, Billy, that have like taken you under their wing and really helped you to become the man that you are today?
Kurt Bedingfield, Isaac's dad. And then again, I wouldn't say that he took me under his wing, not that he wouldn't have if I wouldn't have asked, but just watching him, being around him for about 15 years, probably going on 20, probably over 20 years, directly or indirectly, again, just seeing him, being around him. Really, right now, I've got a friend that I pray with every morning. We chat for 15 minutes every morning. Kind of just hold each other accountable. I got one pastor buddy who actually lives in Alaska. Probably say as much as anything, accountability. Yeah, I wouldn't say, honestly, I've always kind of been a loner. I always went to the wilderness, I think, into nature, because I could just be me. Born with a cleft lip, I think that had a lot to do with, who I was. I think I always had a guard up, and I think we all do. We've all got a facade, a veneer, and I didn't really like being called a hair lip as a kid, and I was big enough that I could kind of intimidate people to not pick on me. They were usually a few years older, but nonetheless, I didn't like it. And so I bullied people out of insecurity. So, to basically go on my best defense was an offense, right? And so I think I went to nature so I could be at peace. I could feel like I was accepted. That, and I hated being on the farm because it was nothing but work, So yeah, who really molded me? I can't say. I would say Jesus. I mean, he's still got a lot of work to do, but yeah, I've got a couple mentors now, and honestly, that's what made me come to the understanding of what the church is, the body. I would say that I've gotten more mentors through the fact that I'm just sharing my faith. I didn't really know how to reach out. I didn't know. For me, being a man was just who was the toughest, like the physically, whoever made the most money, whoever was the physically, the best competitor, the strongest. I used worldly measures. I had no clue what it was to be a Christian. The meek, like I always thought, like a Christian was a guy with a suit who had soft hands, talked very delicately in his tone, was meek and smiled, I shouldn't say meek, but was like almost pretty pansy like, smiled at everything, really didn't stand for anything. And I was like, man, that doesn't make any sense. And then really, in my travels, I started to meet guys like Kurt Bedingfield. And I'm like, man, this dude's a Christian. Like, this guy can do anything. Yeah. And then when I start reading the Bible, and then it's just like, Jesus was, I don't know if I would say badass, but I mean, like, he was so kind and so gentle, but yet when, he would flip tables, and I look at it as like hunting, the art of hunting is the balance of patience and aggression. And the art of following Christ is the balance of standing on truth and giving grace. And we all know, like masculinity is these guys that are uber mean and defensive and always right and macho, and I mean, it's like, well, that ain't going to sustain. That's not sustainable. And so, yeah, you've got to be able to be dangerous, but in the same token, not use it. And when I look back, when I look at the last 26 years of my life, it's been spent with men one-on-one for a week to 2 weeks at a time. And you get to know these guys very, very well, within a couple of days. Yeah. And particularly when you encounter adversity, and that's the beauty of an Alaskan hunting adventure, is you're going to have some sort of adversity, and there's going to be nobody there to get you out of it. So you and the people that you're with, adversity is one of two things. It's either cement or it's a wedge. And out there, you've got no choice. There's no running away. The airplane's coming to pick you both up at the same spot. And during those adversities, that's where the bonds are forged. And that's where, looking back for me, that was my seminary. That was my education of what's in the heart of a man and who they really are. And, you're talking about like this masculinity or, being a man of God or yeah, I guess that's basically what you asked is what I discovered is the people that are more of the world. Like, I'll use this analogy. You get into a hunting camp and you've got an outfitter and he's got 10 guides, right? And 10 hunters come in to go hunting, and they get to the base camp and they're all 10 of them are strutting around. The guy who talks the most, particularly about his money, his girlfriends, his power, his influence, name drops all the people that he knows, has the fanciest boots, biggest gold chain, and the nicest watch. When you get that guy out in the wilderness, 99% of the time, he's the littlest boy inside, right? And what I realized is, to be a man of God is kind of like on a hunting trip. When you meet a guy and day one, you meet him in base camp, and he's the same exact guy, win, lose, or draw, 15 days later, and he doesn't get an animal. When that guy is the same guy, you got a guy that's pretty dang close to what I would say is the ideal of masculinity. He's not ruled by the world. He's not riding up and down by his emotions. He knows who he is. He's centered in Christ, and he knows that, he's not going to be measured by, if he missed that animal, and so much in the way our culture and our world measures men, it's a joke.
And man, you couldn't have said it better. And our world is plagued by that infection, right? It's either you're a macho man and you have to prove it by your bank account and whatever, how your wife looks and all that stuff that honestly, it's just works, right? It's just performance. You have to continue to perform or you're nothing. Or like you said, I think I want to just hit on that and go back to that a lot. In the church, we have this really distorted view of what a man's supposed to be. A lot of Christians have a very distorted view of what it means to be a man. And I wouldn't say that the church that I grew up in was like that a lot, although I'm sure that there are people that go to our congregation that have a distorted view. But I'm in the church world, and man, the view on what it means to be a man in the church is that you would be just soft and gentle, and somebody could come and slap you and you just keep turning cheeks until their hand wore out, and no aggression, right? Zero testosterone level. And it's so unappealing for young men to think, well, why would I want to be a Christian man? Why would I want to follow God if I have to put aside, honestly, all my inhibitions? Because as a man, we have aggression, which isn't called us to go and beat somebody up. I mean, that aggression is used for lots of different things. It's part of what makes me go out and work hard every day, right? Is like this passion to pursue something, this passion to conquer, the passion to overcome, to win, to fight. And so I think so many men, Billy, are stuck right now looking at the model of Christian men and going, dude, I feel so different than that. I don't want to be that weak guy. I don't want to be. And then the flip side of it, right, is a whole bunch of guys have tried to be that. They've tried to be just the kind, no aggression, passive, what Jesus is supposed to be, which he didn't demonstrate that at all, by the way. And Father God is both, he's a lion, he's a warrior. There's so many names for God that's like, the guy's, he's not afraid. He's not shy. He's assertive and he's not mean. But gosh dang, if he doesn't just not afraid to confront you right where you're at, in being a model, a real representation of what it looks like to be a godly Christian man in our day and age. I don't know that there's anything more important, because I think we would both agree that fatherlessness is the number one issue in our world today. That the lack of real fathers, the lack of real men that are willing to step up, willing to show what it means to love a family, to show what it means to protect, to provide, promote. All the role of a father is just so incredibly important. One of the things that you talked about, that you hit on, is adversity. And I'm wondering if you could just go a little bit deeper into that, Billy, because I think it's very hard to, one, feel like a man if you always run away from adversity. But two, it's really hard to step into adversity if you've never had that modeled for you. Can you kind of just talk a little bit more and go deeper into adversity? Like, how do you get people, because you've guided I've watched your shows and there's so many different things that you'll never show on your hunting shows because you can't record all that stuff. But I've watched you take different guys, guys that are manly men and guys that have never stepped out into the woods before. How do you get them over that fear barrier, out of their comfort zone and into a place where they can really get to the point where they're willing and able to face adversity?
Yeah, that's a big one. So my dad was kind of the macho type, just strong as a bull, athletic, just did the work. My mom did the work of a woman and a man. My dad did the work of two men. That was how they made it, survived. So hard work was really easy for me. So that came, physical stuff, that came super easy. It was probably more mental, and then surrender when things got bigger than what you were and more than what you could physically do. And maybe the best way that I could maybe describe it, or at least I'll use this because I've seen it enough, is so often a guy would come up with his son. Let's say they'd come hunting. And so you'd have a 60-year-old man, 55, 60, they'd go out and they'd go hunting. And then the son would go with another guide. And when you'd come back to camp and the guides are talking amongst ourselves, and the kid, I've seen this so many times, the 30-year-old kid that was a gym rat and all buff and, cool and all pumped up and ready to go when he got there, he was the one who on day 5 quit and came back to base camp. And then the old man You know dang good and well he was the one that paid for the trip, worked his whole life. Adversity was part of life. He's the one who came back with a sunburn, scar on his nose, and blood everywhere, and dirty and disheveled, looked like he was about dead, but he's got a ram in his pack, right? I mean, I've seen it a lot. And so we live in this bogus facade world where, I mean, I look at it like this. When somebody says, hey, I want to come hunting. Well, if I'm going to pay, whatever, $30,000 for a moose hunt, well, am I guaranteed a moose? And I'm just like, well, do you want a guarantee?
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, ask yourself, that, and it sounds kind of cocky that to say it, but like, do you want one? And then I'll tell guys this. They'll say, they'll say, hey, I want to kill a sheep, or I want to kill a bear. And I'm like, okay. And again, that's maybe isn't exact, depending on the guy. This is kind of how the conversation would go. But I'm like, okay, but ask yourself this. Do you want to kill a bear, or do you want to go bear hunting? Because if you want to go bear hunting, let's talk. But if you want to kill a bear, I'm not your guy. Because if you're looking for an automatic thing, if that's the only way that you're going to be happy is to kill a bear, I'm not a good enough hunter. I can't tell you, I can't look you in the eye and say that that's going to happen. And, so we live in this world, if you'll find somebody who will tell you what you want to hear. So I would say dealing with adversity, honestly, I think it comes down to being willing to accept the truth, wanting to know the truth, and willing to deal with the truth, whether you like it or not. And I mean, that's what it comes down to following Christ, is just like, do you want to go to God? Are you coming to God because you need something? I've done that a whole bunch, right? I think we all have. We all do.
Yeah.
Or are you coming to God to just say, you know what? I'm done. I'm at the end of my rope. To go back to the hunting analogy is, you know what? I'm 55 years old. My knees are starting to hurt. And I can scrape the money together. If I don't do it now, I never will. I'm no longer worried about the ridicule of my buddies if I don't get one. My ego is in check enough that if I come home unsuccessful, that I'm okay with it. Win, lose, or draw, come hell or high water, I want to go sheep hunting. What guide doesn't want to take that guy hunting, right? Or at least I do. I do personally. You're going to find some guides that are be like, nope. Unless, you can walk 20 miles a day. I don't want you, because that, birds of a feather flock together. There's going to be guys like that because he wants to go, 100% or 80% or 90%. He wants to make sure that he's got every opportunity so he fills his hunts the following year. And honestly, my videos has been the best marketing tool for me. The more honest and humble. That's one thing that I'm learning is humility. Whether it's in your marriage, with your kids, or particularly with other men. What I'm learning is that if you're humble enough and confident enough in yourself, the old adage is like the quiet ones, that's usually who you got to watch out for. And I'd say that's probably generally true, because usually where there is multitude of words, there is folly. The guy that's flapping his jaws the most, the reason he's flapping his jaws is because he's scared. He's got to prove through his words, right? And so when you get to that stage, and again, I think it's one of those things that you can't hack. The world, they want so many things, but there's a lot. The things that are really valuable in life, the things that are going to actually carry you and sustain you through hard times, you can't hack those. You can't. And it's another lie of this world is trying to hack everything and get shortcuts. Yeah, you should learn from other people. Anyways, I probably just brought up about 10 different things there, but I think it all just comes down to dealing with adversity. And that's the blessing and the curse of an Alaskan hunting adventure, is that you will encounter it. And then for me, that's what taught me to deal with adversity is, number one, I loved it. Number two, there's nobody there to get you out of it. And then once you get a taste of that, it's no different than Lightning Creek when I was a kid. And I'm like, what's around that next bend? Is you get through that one adversity and you're like, holy smokes, we survived that? Dang, I want to do that again. What can we experience next? And I know for me, it makes you come alive, man. It does. It's like,
Yeah.
When I always say the best sheep hunts begin on day 5, that's when the sheep hunt begins. That's when you're like, holy smokes, this could be a
It's
good
true.
one.
Well, I think the important thing to me about adversity is what all of us hit before we ever get to breakthrough. And if you don't know how to face adversity, then you never actually really get the breakthrough that you really want, right? Like if every time I get to adversity, I veer off, I look for the easy path. James 1 says it like this, like James 1 says, consider it pure joy or hilarious laughter when you encounter trials, for the testing of our faith produces perseverance. And then it goes on to say, when perseverance runs its course, you will lack nothing. And so I always think about it like this math equation. Like if you want to get to a place where you don't lack anything, right? If I said to a man like, hey, do you want to get to a place where you have everything that you've ever wanted, everything that will sustain you, everything that will help to develop you? Every guy's going to go, yeah, how do I do that? Okay, listen, you have to test your faith with perseverance. You have to stay in the storm. You got to stay in the storm long enough that it develops perseverance in you. It's like the craziest thing, right? Because without perseverance, without the ability to suffer a long time, we can never actually get fully developed. And man, how many guys are missing out on the confidence of that God has for them because they won't suffer long enough, one, and or they won't challenge themselves enough. That's another thing that I've been thinking about a lot is all confidence. Confidence isn't something that I can give to you, right? Like I can't give you confidence. I could give you courage. I can encourage you. So I can impart my courage to you, but confidence comes through doing. It comes through like, man, I didn't think I could row across that creek that was raging, and I did it, right? And so I did it. Somebody encouraged me. I got to the other side, and now I feel a little bit better. I feel like, ooh, I can take this on. And I'm sure you see this a lot in hunting. Like a guy will go, man, I'm 55, my knees are hurting, but then they see themselves go up the hill. Right? They hike a really long hill and you're encouraging them, you're helping them, and they find a side of themselves. That's actually what happens, right? Is we find something, this confidence that we didn't see that we had before, because we can do way more than what we think that we can do. And that's the process of God building a man. The process of God building a man is God doesn't give us chairs, he gives us trees. And he says, take those trees and make chairs, right? Go through the adversity of peeling the bark, go through the adversity of splitting the log, go through the adversity of shaping it, of, getting the splinters, of having to figure it out. God doesn't give us steak, he gives us animals. And he says, hey, go through the adversity of hunting that down. God doesn't give us perfect relationships. He gives us other people, and he goes, go through the adversity, right, of building and forging and leading and growing a family. And that, like you said, that all adversity is the cement, I think is what you said. It bonds us together. It puts us in this place where after having gone through it, well, it's either going to kick you out, right? People are either going to split up or they're going to stay together because of adversity. And man, I just can't. When you hit on that, I just thought it was so brilliant, because in our day and age, we are constantly looking for the shortcut. We are constantly looking for the way around. When we hit hard times, when your dad hit hard times, he just got harder because there's no social media going, there's 19 different ways that you can do that. When their marriage got tough, he wasn't going, hey, maybe I should just get a different woman, because it wasn't popular back then. Nowadays, we're going, hey, if your marriage is tough, something's wrong with you. If you're working really hard, there's 19 different ways that you can earn money without having to do any work. And the biggest ripoff in the world would be that you would get everything that you think that you want to get without having to work. Right? That you would get that bull moose without any opportunity of failure. And you can go on those hunts. Those hunts are in Texas. There's a lot of high fence places, and I don't care if a guy wants to go hunt like that. It's fine. I'm not even saying that I wouldn't go chase an animal around high fence. I'm not judging someone for doing that. I'm just saying you can't do life like that. You can't do life and actually feel successful, feel proud of yourself, lead your family well, please God, without learning how to embrace adversity. One of the best quotes that I ever heard was Jordan Peterson said, "You have to pick your suffering." And he went on to say, "You either suffer doing the thing that's going to get you what you really want," right? Like, I really want to be a hunter. Okay. If you really want to be a hunter, then you have to quit worrying about if you are actually going to get the animal. You have to quit worrying about how hard the hunt is. All you have to put your mind to is, what do I need to do today to get myself able to go through whatever I have to go through, right? Doesn't matter. So you can get mentally in shape, physically in shape, or you can opt out. And Jordan goes on to say, like, man, you already know what the outcome's going to be. Like, if you don't pick your suffering with weight loss, for instance, with what you eat, well, sure, you can comfort yourself now in your 20s and 30s and 40s and eat whatever you want, but there's a day that comes where you have to pay for all of your comfort. And it looks like diabetes. It looks like your life's cut short. And I just think there's so much misinformation out there on not just what it means to be a man, but what was meant for our good. We now look at it as bad. We look at it as, man, something's wrong with me, or, it shouldn't be this hard. And the truth is like, life's freaking hard. And why I think we all love the humble guy is, honestly, that's the most honest guy in the room. The humble guy is the strongest guy in the room. The guy that, all of us want to talk about what we've done. All of us want, praise and respect. But the humble guy is the guy that goes, man, I'm not talking today because I've got a lot of walking to do left in life, right? He's got the right perspective on life and where he's going. Man, if I could impart to every man, right, this one thing, quit backing down from challenges, quit backing down and pulling away from that thing that God's actually called you into. He's not called us into a life of comfort, but he's called us to go into the darkest, deepest places in this world and to be salt and light. And sorry, I'm rambling on, but I feel like if guys could get that, they would see some real breakthrough in their life.
Yeah. Do you know, and I was looking for that as you were talking, that's all gold. Can't agree more with it, is that, yeah. And unless you're rooted in Christ, all these, you will have a million alternate routes or avenues to get out of whatever jam or adversity you're in flashing before you. And that's why probably more difficult now to be a Christ follower than at any other time, because the worldly, the flashy objects, the flashy lures are everywhere. Right. And so unless you're really rooted, and once you are rooted, you can spot them pretty dang easy, but they're everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Just like you said, it's popular now. It's like, oh, divorce is just so commonplace that it's okay. Okay, just quit. Go find a new one. Just find a new job. You have it. Well, guess what? The same problem is going to happen in your new job, in your next marriage. It's like you're going to have to freaking dig in your heels sooner or later, or you're going to run your whole dang life. And like in the hunting realm, like, I look at it as like, man, like it's easy for me to say I'm not the one writing the check, but like for example, like where I used to sheep hunt, we used to go like 90% success. We had tons of sheep, and then we had this major winter die off, and then the sheep numbers dwindled, and then for many years it was like sheep hunting was really tough. Well, guess what? I learned how to sheep hunt those years, right? It was easy.
Yes.
Any idiot with a backpack that was in reasonably good shape could run enough ridges and you'd kill a ram, as long as you were shooting, major. got a legal one. But then, and then when, so then I learned then I'm like, okay, man, I got to know how to hunt because I might only get one stock. So I got to get this right. Well, then my body started to hurt and I'm like, dang, I don't want to climb all these ridges if I don't have to. And I can't like I used to. Then you start to pay attention a little more. And I don't know where I was thinking it was in James, but maybe it's Peter, where, you kind of list like, build character and perseverance and long suffering and patience. It's like it's step, which leads to hope, which leads to love. And it's like each one there's you can't hack that. If you hack one and then you move on to step 2, guess what will happen at step 2? Step 2, the foundation will give out of that because you didn't complete step 1. It's just exactly what Jordan Peterson was saying. So yeah, and it's the bend of the river. It's like, what's the next challenge? The unknown that lies ahead. It is. It doesn't get any better than that for a man. Is you got to be challenged, and if you're not challenged, just like the adage, you're stuck in a rut. Why are you in a rut? Because you're doing the same dang thing. You're going nowhere. You're spinning your wheels, and you're just going deeper and deeper. You have no challenge. There's no need for life. And retirement is the biggest sham that there is. Nothing in nature.
Yeah.
Your life is going to look different. You got to slow down. Your ministry is going to change. Your life's going to change. But I mean, as soon as you're just thinking it's like, oh, well, I'm just going to quit work and then I'm just going to like enjoy life. Unless you're giving something to somebody, you're not going to enjoy your life. Unless you're producing something, you're not going to enjoy it. It just so many lies of the world. And that's where, for me, it just took me about probably 6 years of really studying the Bible, applying it to life, listening, seeing, watching. And for about 15 years, I've been trying to disprove the Bible. And you know what? Like, when it says that he who sows of the flesh will reap of the flesh corruption. He who sows into the Spirit will reap from the Spirit eternal life. That's a truth that I don't like all the time, especially now in this stage of my life, because I can look back and see what I did sow into the flesh. Some good things have come. I've always tried to treat people fairly. That's one thing my dad taught me. You don't leave a deal screwing somebody over. That'll come biting. Even if you know that that you're getting the upper hand on that guy, you do right by him. Right? My dad. Mm-hmm. To keep integrity, and that served me. But there's things that I have done of the flesh, that I've sown in iniquity and in sin. And you know what? The Bible's right. Jordan Peterson is right. You will reap of the flesh corruption, and that is not going to last. You're going to pay for that sooner or later. And just life experience, I guess. You learn things the hard way. My first sheep hunt that I was guiding, I was the guide. I have a knack of learning everything the hard way. I wish I would have latched onto some mentors, but honestly, I never saw anybody. Now I'm seeing a lot of them. I mean, I've got several guys now, maybe, mentoring me, holding me accountable. So I've got lots of them now, but that's only like really, really recently, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I want to ask a few questions before we end. You've had so many crazy outdoor experiences. I mean, on your biography, it says that you spent over 100 days a year in a tent, which I'm a little jealous. And at the same time, not so jealous because a tent's only comfortable for so long. But what's the closest you've been to death?
I had a guy, it's on my YouTube channel. The film is called Face to Face. He fell in a river and I basically tried to pull him out, and in doing so, I got pulled into the river with him. And so we were swimming and, so nearly drowned in a river. Praise the Lord. By the grace of God, we survived that one. Yeah.
I watched that one, by the way.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty hairy. That one I thought I was gone. And I look back at it And as I don't know, you'll maybe remember from the film, but like looking back at it, if I didn't have faith that that God would receive me, that I was in right standing with him, I would say that Billy Molls in the flesh without Jesus, I can't look at you and say that I would have held on, if I'm being honest. I mean,
Wow.
I hate to say that, but it's like, I'm just being honest. Because I remember thinking, I remember it flashed into my mind, and I got to believe that I wouldn't be unique. As like, okay, I'm going to die. Am I ready? Am I ready to to be judged? Am I ready to, maybe you don't believe in judgment, but I did, I do. And
yeah, for sure.
I mean, I look at the way I live my life. Like I see a grizzly bear and I see this, whatever kind of bug this is crawling on my screen in my screen porch. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, he's going to do what God created him to do. The grizzly bear, he wants to eat. He's going to eat anything he think he can. He's honest. They're all honest. Everything in nature does what it's supposed to do. But man, we're given free will. And so if what Jordan Peterson is saying, that you'll pay the piper, that everything comes at a cost, you either pay now or pay later, you mean to think that you can run around in this world and do whatever you want and there's not going to be an accountability for that? That is counterintuitive to everything that I've ever seen in this world. And so for me, that was it. Like I felt like I thought of my wife, I thought of my kids. I remember saw my wife's face, and I remember just thinking, man, they know who I am. And if this is my time, I'm as good with God as I know how to be. Like if Don dies, I die with him. And I'm so thankful that didn't happen, pre 2011. But yeah, grizzly bear stuff, had some, some run-ins with bears and, but yeah, that was probably the closest to death. I was in a boating wreck when I was guiding fishermen. Bow of a boat hit me in the face. I'm still kind of dealing with that. You can see a scar, knocked out. All these teeth are fake. I was knocked unconscious.
Oh my gosh.
That was a rough one, but never like starving or exposure. I mean, I've been cold and, minor hypothermia before, but yeah, it's a lot of close calls, but that drowning one, that was definitely, I mean, I was 6 feet from death for sure. Like if we wouldn't have hit like a little sandbar to get our footing underneath us, because the river just narrowed down to like this narrow channel. It was like, I don't know, 80 yards wide, and then it narrowed down to about 15, and it was just a rapidous pool because we'd been having tons of rain. And I made a rookie mistake. My ego, I let pressure get to me. You'd have to watch the film. That's a story in and of itself. But I mean, bottom line, I made the mistake. We had to get back across this river to get to our camp. The river was rising so fast. So I made a whole bunch of bonehead mistakes. And if that wouldn't have been shallow enough for us to dig our feet in, the current would have swept us into that rapid pool. And there's no doubt Don would have died. He had the pack with the caribou antlers on his back, and I was holding on to him. And I was determined. There's like, I couldn't have lived with myself had he died, and I would have survived. I mean, that would have been hell to live with. And so praise the Lord, I held on. So.
Well, I mean, I watched it, and I think that everybody should go watch that. You go to Modern Day Mountain Man on YouTube, and you can watch that encounter. It's crazy because I do a lot of fly fishing, and so I spend quite a bit of time in rivers, wading rivers and stuff like that. And people underestimate how powerful a river is, big time. And it does not take much water to just completely undercut you and then throw clothing on top of that, right? Holy cow, man. That's crazy. Yeah. I went under one time just in the dark I fished for too long, and I came out in the dark, and I had to wade across the section of this really deep river. And I filled my waders up with water, stepped off into a deep hole, And man, that's enough to scare you, right? Like you get out of that situation. And another time I left, it was supposed to thunderstorm. And for a long time, I really was addicted to fly fishing, like super addicted. I built fly rods and, turned the cork on a lathe and did inlays and stuff. I mean, tie flies, just insane. And my wife was like, "Hey, are you sure you should go? It's going to thunder and lightning." I was like, no, I'm good. I'm good. And so I got 100 yards out into this river. Our river's really wide here in Redding. I got 100 yards out wading across all these different reds to fly fish this spot. And here comes a storm. It was crazy thunder and lightning. Boom. And that first lightning strike, I turn around and all the guys on the shore turn and they run up the hill. They're scrambling to get up the hill. And I'm stuck out in the middle of the river. The problem is I can't see the bottom. So I had to be able to see where I was walking. Otherwise, because I'm having to walk on top of these, gravel bars to get back. And it was crazy. The storm literally came right over the top of me. Thunder and lightning just smashing. And every time it lightning and thunder, I would think, well, I'm still alive. I haven't got hit. And then trying to find the way back was just so crazy. But yeah, out in the woods, man, there's so much stuff that can go wrong. And I just can't imagine how many different crazy stories you have. What's the craziest thing you've seen outdoors?
Seeing a brown bear fight a sow and kill its two little cubs, they do. I know they do that, but it's just, you see nature. This is what I love, is the wilderness immersion. So you're immersed in the wilderness, and then that's like real life, right? And so you kind of become part of it, and you really get to, settle in with it. I almost hate to use the word vibe, but you kind of become one with it, and time changes. Your idea of time changes, and just the honesty of nature and the reality of it and the harshness. There's like a brutal harshness to it, but it's kind of pure and simple and honest at the same time. Big caribou herds are kind of cool to see. I called in a pack. There were 14 wolves. 8 of them came like right to us, and we shot them at like 40 yards when we finally shot. Just seeing 8 wolves coming right at you, from a mile and a half away, to see that was pretty wild. Yeah, just seeing like so many things, like calling a moose from 5 miles away. To realize that their antlers are satellite dishes. It's basically God's satellite dish, and how it's all made, and how God's timing is so perfect, because those antlers have velvet on them and they're absorptive, until about 2 weeks before the rut. Then they're hard and reflective, and that sound comes in, hits their palms, and it's reflected right to their ears. So that's how they find one another to breed, and just figuring out how it's all connected. And, you watch a bear and how he catches a salmon, and they'll rip the skin off, and they'll eat the skin and the eggs if it's a female of the salmon, and they'll eat the brains out, but then they'll leave the flesh of the fish laying there. And everybody's like, well, why do they do that? It's like, well, he knows there's more fat, protein, and nutrients in those parts of the fish than there is the flesh. And they're like, well, how does he know that? I said, well, that bear has been hungry. We live in a society where we're not hungry. We don't even know what nutrition is. We're stuffed so dang
it's
full.
True.
And it's just like life. We want to be so full. And it's like, man, you got to empty yourself once in a while. You got to have that extreme, that discomfort, so you can have some appreciation. You can't lay on the beach and drink Mai Tais for, in an 80-degree weather for your whole entire life. I don't care who you are. That gets old. I don't know. Just that. And honestly, those are the coolest things that I've seen. That's what I find interesting about all these hunting trips that I've been on. The things that I remember 5-10 years later are 90% of the time things that at the time they happened were seemingly insignificant. They weren't the mountain top experiences that you might imagine. The scores of the animals and the shooting of the animal. Like, I don't remember any of those things. I just remember those moments around a campfire, or skinning an animal, or joke, or, just something about the people that I was with, or just these little nuances of nature that just been like, God, you're amazing. Like, that's that, because everything in nature has a purpose, and everything happens for a reason. Figuring those little things out, one minute step, if you will, at a time, those are the coolest things. And those are most of those cool things in our lives, we can't really relate to other people, in a grand fashion.
Yeah. Man, I love that. Well, I think just everything that you stand for, Billy, I just love that you took the time to come on here and just open up your life for us to look at and inspire men. And I really want to encourage guys to jump into an adventure. A lot of men have never been invited into an adventure before. And honestly, there's a quote that says, masculinity is not something a man's born with. It's something that's poured into a man by other men. And that's from John Eldridge. And I really do think that the best, easiest way to jump into an adventure is with somebody else, right? Somebody who knows how to do that. And I just want to encourage guys to go and check out what Billy's doing. You can go to his YouTube page. Billy, what's the best way for guys to find you? Is it Modern Day Mountain Man?
Yep. My YouTube channel is called Modern Day Mountain Man. If you Google search Modern Day Mountain Man, my website will come up. It's called BillyMollsAdventures.com. But yeah, I'm on Facebook, Instagram. That's it for social media. But yeah, if you're interested, my men's ministry called Trust the Guide, that's on my same YouTube channel, Modern Day Mountain Man. You'll find different playlists, but I got a lot of my Alaska hunting films are on there. And I'm kind of doing a young men's mentorship of sorts, which I call Blaze Your Trail. Just kind of getting that off the ground. That's on the same YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. So guys, go check that out. Look at what Billy's doing and how he's living his life. And man, just get inspired to take on the adventure that God has us all on. And so, Billy, you're an incredible man. Thank you so much for coming on here. But more importantly, I think just for living a life that so represents what God has called us men to live. And there's not a lot of guys right now that are doing that are stepping up and leading the charge. And you're one of those men. So it's an honor to spend an hour with you and to have you encourage and speak into our men. So thank you so much, Billy.
Appreciate it, brother.
All right, BraveCo men, have an incredible week. We will see you next week. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.